Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the latest episode of Allure of the Poor. I am so excited to be here today because my guest, we met in New York. We've met a couple of times, but I don't know if you remember, Julia, our wonderful rooftop
Yes,
evening of
I
some fun
do.
after I think it was a Zap event.
Hmm.
Um, so it's been wonderful. So my guest today is Julie St. John of Petrocelli Winery. And
Yes.
I mean, there's not much to say. I'm going to say pretty much the majority of people who listen to this podcast are going to know about you and your winery. And that is something spectacular because the
Uh,
wines are great, the people are great. So I am honored to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Ah, well, thank you. Thank you. And happy holidays, everybody. We are in the middle of the holiday week. So thank you for taking time out of probably a busy week for other reasons than just winery stuff this week to sit down with
Yeah, year
me.
end is always, yes,
It's
always exciting.
yes, yes. So let's talk first about the family itself. You guys
Sure.
started really, you bought land, the family bought land in 1927 in Dry Creek. And that
Yes,
was long, long before anybody had ever heard of Dry Creek or it was an AVA. So,
right.
like, why that area? Tell us about the family history and how they settled there.
Sure. Well, my grandparents, Giovanni and Julia, came from uh, the Redding area of California. So there were no grapes over there. They had met. They were both from Italy, came over separately, met when my grandfather was selling vegetables to my great grandparents' hotel, and then they got married. And they had started to have a family, and they were looking for a place to settle down. And it is lost to me why or how they came to this particular piece of property, but there must have been the family who had this property since the early 1900s. They were Italian, so there may have been, some sort of connection there. And they were in a bit of a distress. They needed, because of prohibition had ended their winery. They were selling grapes for as long as they could, and then the bottom fell out of the market. 1927, it was just a hard time for most people. And so my grandparents picked up a shuttered winery, a home, and 25 acres of Zinfandel. And that is where our story begins here in Dry Creek Valley. And you're right, it wasn't AVAs and all of that didn't come around until much, much later, until the 1980s for us. But they basically set down their roots here. They ended up having 4 children. My father is the youngest of 4, and he was the one born right here in this office that I'm sitting in. That was the home that he grew up in and the home that I grew up in with my sisters. So it's I'm looking out the window at the same view that I've looked out since I was a kid. And now it's my office.
That really is something to think about, that these generations, and it's still this same house, and it might have changed, what the reason of the house is, or the purpose of the
Mhm.
house, but to have such a tradition and so much hearth, hearth and home there,
Mhm.
nestled within your business must be, near and dear.
Yes. It
Yeah.
is, and it's pretty amazing when you think that 9 decades later, uh, the family we're still family owned and operated. There's still plenty of family involved with everything, and to come kind of home in a way is pretty cool. Not many people can say that.
Right. That's absolutely. And you know what? In today's world, with so many wineries being bought up and just being digested, no other better word for it other than digested by these big conglomerates, it's always nice to see that there is still a family winery, and a family that isn't just calling themselves a family winery that truly is family in whole, working there.
Right.
And yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It is. It is very special. I mean, just thinking about, the generations. I mean, thanks to my grandparents, thanks to my dad and my uncle, who were the second generation members that continued on. Now I'm third generation, along with my sisters. My husband works with me. My brother-in-law is the vineyard manager. I mean, it just kind of just keeps going. And even fourth generation is represented. My nephew Mitch is out there working in the vineyard with his dad. So, we're passing it along. Hopefully, by the time we get to the fifth generation, we'll see them become involved, and it'll just be something that will turn over as we go forward.
So that leads me to my question. Like, usually my first question is, how does somebody get it? How did you find your wine way, basically?
Mhm.
But you grew up in it. Was there ever a point where you're like, this is not the path I'm going to go on? Or was it, this is the path I want to go on? Which direction were you?
That's great, because for me, when I went away to college, I did not have plans on coming back. I wanted to get away from the small town of Geyserville as fast as I could. And I ended up at Dominican University in Marin County. And I majored in English with a writing emphasis. And so I had plans on going into the publishing world to be an editor. So as I worked my way towards that way, to get over to the East Bay, my sister was pregnant with her first child and was working in the tasting room. And I started to commute back and forth between my job down there and my job here on the weekends. And one day my dad and I had a conversation in the old tasting room warehouse, and he wondered if I would be interested in coming to join the family. And at that point, wine was pretty intriguing to me. I'd gotten over the whole small town not wanting to come back and that kind of thing. And so I dove in, started in the tasting room, and worked my way up to where I am today. And that was 36 or 37 years ago. It's been a while. It's my life, basically, and did not expect it to turn out that way.
And so the English degree, the writing,
yeah,
a different
tack, but I use it. I write, actually, when the pandemic started, I was writing a newsletter about once a month and doing blog posts under my blog Vino in my Dino. And I started writing a newsletter once a week. And it's kind of helped. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I have not run out of ideas yet. And my readership, it's so great. I get to hear back from them, especially if something has hit them in the right spot. Right. And I get some great notes. I just wrote a post this month that said, "You make my Mondays," because I come in on Monday. I don't read my email over the weekend, and then I come in on Monday and I get to read all the responses. Like I said, if something has really hit right, I get lots of notes. So that's a good feeling. A great part of my job. Yeah. So, hey, I made it work.
That's good. Right. So let's go back in history a little bit, and sure. Let's go back to Prohibition. Now, I know long before your time, but Prohibition, Petrocelli was a winery at that point, and they were selling grapes, correct? That's how they kind of survived?
Well, we survived, yes. How my grandparents were able to survive the rest of Prohibition was just selling the grapes, which the previous family just had fallen on hard times. And so the vineyards were still here, were in good condition. And so we could sell them to head of households. So in the area around us, there were many people of European descent who made wine at home. And the great part about Prohibition, even though it was a dry time, is that you could apply and get a permit to make your own wine, 200 gallons per family, per head of household. And that's about 84 cases. So I always like to say there's a lot of happy families during that time, because they kept our vineyards going and they got to enjoy their own homemade wine. And I think my grandfather, who didn't come from a part of Italy where they had vineyard, he was from very far north, up in very near up in the Alps, basically. And he I think during that time, have to imagine he was making wine right along with the other head of households and learning the craft.
Right. And Zinfandel is really, and that's what that vineyard site was Zinfandel, right? And
Right.
so Zinfandel played an important role in the Prohibition time period, right? Like that was
Right.
really the grape that made Prohibition household wine, kind of.
Yes, they were shipped. Zinfandel was shipped. It was one of those. The beauty of Zinfandel, really, and when you try it today, you understand, is of its. There's a bit of softness to it. There's a bit of fruit, and so that's what made it such a great grape for people who were making wine on their own or shipping it. I know that Zinfandel was shipped across the United States to different wherever the trains would go. They'd stop and bring their carload of Zinfandel grapes. And but it was because it made a wine you could drink nearly as soon as it was fermented. I mean, it wasn't like something today we age, we age it in oak and that kind of thing, and it takes on all kinds of complexities. But I think really the beauty of the Zinfandel grape was that you could make a wine and you could drink it fairly soon after it was completed, the whole process. And so Zinfandel did play that important part. It plays an important part here in Dry Creek Valley. It's been planted here since they first planted grapes, wine grapes in Dry Creek Valley in the mid 1800s. So it was a grape that was burgeoning even before Prohibition. So it was something that was very inherent, very a part of who we all were when we made wine here in Dry Creek Valley. So that's also an important part of its place in the history of winemaking here.
And what do you think about Zinfandel, that it's happy there? There's no other way to say it. It is happy in your area. Like, what do you think about the Dry Creek area, about that area that Zinfandel has just found to be it's a favorite home there?
Yes, it is. It grows, it thrives very well up on the hillsides, which is where most of it has always been planted. You'll find other grapes planted on the valley floor, but when you talk about Zinfandel in Dry Creek Valley, of which, just a little side note, Sonoma County has about 5,000 acres of Zinfandel planted here, the most outside of San Joaquin Valley. And the half of it is here in Dry Creek Valley, which is one of the smallest of the four major appellations. So we definitely are, Zinfandel is part and parcel of what we do here. So getting back to the why, and I think it's because of the quality that we get once it's grown on these hillsides that are all around here. And I unfortunately lost track of your original question, but I hopefully have answered it or restated so that all of a sudden when I do those factoids, I go like, oh yeah, I want to say that, but right in the middle of what I was saying.
You answered. I was just asking why Zinfandel is in love with Dry Creek. What makes it so special there?
It's the soils up on the hillsides in part. It's the climate. We have, that fog that comes in during the summer and cools everything off. It's what brings great development across all varieties here in the valley. But for Zinfandel, it's just that nice combination between the climate that we have with the hot days and the cool nights, and of course the soils play an important part too, and hillsides, because St. George rootstock is what our Zinfandel is planted on. It's because it helps the vine to thrive in a challenging place, because hillsides tend to, they don't have a lot of access to water. They don't have a lot, so they're rocky. And so, they give the vine a challenge. So to give the vine help, this is before we were even here, the grapes were planted on St. George rootstock. And so it helps, again, to develop the correct vine structure and things like that so that they can thrive on these hillsides.
Mm-hmm. And now going back to the Petrocelli history, you guys started off in 1927 with not a 25 Hectares?
25 acres, right?
I'm on hectares, acres, right?
Okay. Oh,
But
yeah.
no, I belong on acres. Um, and then you expanded in 63. So how much did you expand? And then, so you started with 25, you expanded, and where are you at now? Because you now have multiple estate vineyards, right?
Right. We do. So we started with that original, and actually there was enough land so that we did some more expansion right around here, because they would think it was about 90 acres total, with 25 acres of vineyard planted. So we now, in 1963, the brothers started to buy up property. So with that actually established about a mile west of the winery, three major pieces down there. So we have 50 acres now planted on what I call the home ranch, the original. And then another 55 acres a mile west of here, all Bordeaux varieties. And then we also help farm my cousin's vineyard, which is the Bushnell vineyard, about 5 miles down the valley from us, up on a bench, pretty steep, high bench. And that's where another 15 acres of vineyard is. So we farm about 120 acres total now.
Just a bit bigger now. Just a bit bigger.
Yeah, just a little.
And today you guys you're getting ready kind of to nudge the fifth generation, you had said, right?
Well, they're all under the age of 12. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see where life finds them when they get into high school and college and beyond. So,
but I bet they enjoy being in the vineyards now, right? Where it's fun now.
Yeah, and it's starting them early. In fact, my nephew Mitch, he actually started working with his dad when he was in 8th grade over the summers, and he worked all the way through high school. When he was home from college, he'd work in the vineyard with his dad, and he actually has an ag business degree from Chico, CSU. So yeah. So anyway, but I think it's important, to be out there. That's what gets you the love of the growing, the love of watching something go from what looks like a dead vine right now to harvest time, where the grapes are, there's nothing like I'm going to do a little commercial. There's nothing like eating wine grapes compared to the grapes that you get in the store. And it makes all the difference. If any of you listening out there ever can make it during harvest or have been to harvest, you'll understand there's just something so delicious. And Zinfandel grapes are still my favorite of all the grapes, all the wine grapes that I've tasted over the years.
It is. It's very different. I love walking through the vineyard and tasting. And my husband and I have a little game between us as it gets close to harvest time. We taste, and then we bet each other who can get the better bricks, like who can guess the bricks from the taste. And then you analyze it and see who wins. And we're pretty split. We're pretty good with the guessing of the bricks, but that's our little game we play, and it's fun. And it's exciting to like look at the growth of that grape, and not just necessarily growth size wise, but how it evolves phenolically and all of that. And then the seeds, and how they go from green to green brown to and then brown, and it's just it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch them grow into eventually, yay, we can pick them and make wonderful wine out of it, right?
Exactly. Yes. And that's the beauty of it. You chew up the skins and you understand tannin. I mean, there's little things, that's where all the, once fermented, that's, why the skins play that important part, because they've got all that flavor, but they also have, all the little bits that make up the delicious parts of wine.
Right. Absolutely. Now, what I think is very cool, well, one of the things that I think is very cool is that 70% of your winery is women run. And yes.
Yeah, thanks to I have 3 sisters and cousins.
Thanks to genetics in the family.
Genetics. You're gonna laugh when you hear this, Lauren. Did you know that the 5th generation right now is all boys?
Really?
Five
Five boys.
generation members are all boys. So it may flip again in the future, but for now, and yeah, and it just is, again, my hat is off to the previous generations for setting us up for success and for including us in the business and for learning it in many ways from the ground up. Just having grown up here, and I always say we were such pests when we lived right at the winery, so we were always down in the cellar or wandering around somewhere, being curious, and we didn't learn too much, because it was just a bunch of equipment laying around or a bunch of tanks. But I do remember crawling around on top of the tanks. I cringe now because I'm afraid of heights, but I wasn't, I guess, back then. But again, having grown up side by side, we got a little off on the subject here, but growing up side by side with the winery is you are just part of it. And I think that's what made us all part of it as the third generation entered it. And now, yes, we are women owned and we're operated, and we have a woman winemaker too. Montse Reese is her name, and she's just 2021 was her 15th harvest with us.
Oh, wow.
She spent the first 8 years as assistant winemaker to my Uncle John, and then when he passed, then she became the winemaker, and she's just done a fantastic job too with the wines, just making them her own, looking at them a little bit differently, looking at the lots and that kind of thing. But yes, so getting back to it, yes, we are,
and you were actually leading the way, because I think she was like the third female winemaker in the whole, I think California, but at least in the northern California, right? She was like the third female winemaker.
She's the third winemaker here at Pedroncelli, but there are other women who have been winemakers for quite some time here in Northern California wine industry. Yeah, there's sorry, I know that may have been a little bit misleading, but yeah, we've had, I always like to say, we've had 3 winemakers in our time here in 94 years. And my grandfather was first, then my Uncle John. But he had the lion's share because he was winemaker beginning in 1948. So he not only oversaw the vineyards, but he also oversaw the winemaking. And so everything that changed in between, for instance, we've had many different grapes planted here on the home ranch. We've had Gewürztraminer, Johannesburg Riesling, Napa Gamay for our Gamay Beaujolais that we used to make. And, we've had, and then we found, well, that wasn't exactly the right grape for the right spot. And so I've kind of diverted into another subject, but what we have found is you find the right grape for the right spot, where it's more site specific than it is like that grape will work. And then you find out, Chardonnay didn't exactly thrive in the warmer end of Dry Creek Valley, and neither did Pinot Noir. We had both of them planted on our property. Now we depend on growers to do it who are 10 and 14 miles to the south of us, because it makes a big difference.
But see, that's why you just celebrated a couple of years ago your 90th anniversary, and they're so spectacular. And that's why, as I introduced you at the beginning, so many people know your winery, is because if you just plant because, Chardonnay is the go-to grape, or Pinot is the go-to grape, and you plant it on your home site, and that's not where it belongs, you're not going to create the quality that you have shown for 90 plus years. You've got to recognize that the soil has a lot to say in that quality of that fruit. And so
I couldn't agree more, because, even though we made good, I'm going to Gewürztraminer and Johannesburg Riesling, which are unusual. They were grapes that, they were more of the time than they were the right grape for the right spot. Because now what's planted there in their stead are Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and Sauvignon Blanc, because those tend to do well in that area. And you discover things, again, it's sometimes we made a boatload of Chenin Blanc in the 70s. It was the one, we didn't grow any, we bought it from a grower, but we made a boatload of it because guess what? That was the wine that everybody enjoyed back then. Mm-hmm. So we made changes in the line as years go by. And, it's not only site specific, it's also like your portfolio specific. What right. do we want to be known for? And so we rely definitely heavily on Zinfandel and Cabernet Sauvignon, and our Sauvignon Blanc as our estate white.
Right. And this is a perfect time because the first wine I want to talk about is this beautiful Zinfandel, because I mean, I know you are known for the Zin and Cabernet, like you said, the Sauvignon Blanc, but honestly, 100% honesty, Zinfandel is, synonymous with Pinot Gigio. It goes hand in hand with it.
Yes.
And this is Mother Clone. Now, you guys were bonded the 113th winery, so kind of early on in the bonding age, and I think this is really what you are known for. But tell us about Mother Clone and the cool facts about Mother Clone's history.
Certainly. All right. Well, going back to when Zinfandel was first planted on the property, it was in the early 1900s. And so when my grandparents bought the property, had that original, that eventually became known as the Mother Vineyard. And so because it was what was here, it was what helped us along through all those years. And by the 1970s, though, they're reaching 70 years old. And it was a time to start thinking about some changes and not changing variety, because we knew that Zinfandel, we wanted to stay with Zinfandel, but it was time to consider replanting. So by then, early 1980s, block by block, we'd replant. Well, when we named the wine, we didn't name it probably in the early 1990s. Cloning was a thing. Remember Dolly the sheep and all that stuff. And so, we thought, well, the Mother Vineyard, and cloned it back into place. And, Mother Clone is a good name for it. So it's so funny because I always try to shorten the explanation, but it always turns into this nice long story. But
it deserves the story, though. It deserves the story.
Yeah, it does, because what we did is we ended up pulling it all up. We started again with St. George rootstock, so that's, you put that in there, and then we used budwood, not just from the previous vineyard, which then continued the heritage of that particular one, but we also, if Joe's vineyard was doing really well just across the way, let's borrow some budwood from there and see how it does on this block over here. And so we did it more intentionally, I think, than the original Zinfandel planting. But so the Mother Clone is a combination of mostly that second generation vineyard, which is now 40 years old, along with, we have a little corner of the 100-year-old vine still producing. There aren't many left because time will once you reach over 100, it's kind of hard to keep everything together. And it also is our youngest vineyard. We have 3 generations of Zinfandel planted on our home ranch. The oldest, the middle-aged, the 40-year-old, and then we have about an 8-year-old vineyard planted with the rock pile clone, which for now is part of the Mother Clone Zin as it makes its way to maturity. We'll see if we're ever going to do maybe a single plant vineyard from that or not. But that's the beauty of Mother Clone. It's combining these 3 generations of grapes, along with a nice healthy dose of Petite Sirah. Yeah. That is, again, part of our tradition. Ever since we've been making Zinfandel, Petite Sirah has always been grown side by side with it. It adds structure, it adds color. Zinfandel can be a little on the pale side. So if you want to, give it a little dose of color, definitely Petite Sirah is the grape to blend. And I also think that it helps it to age a little longer than your average Zinfandels. I think it gives it, again, that aging potential. And
for those, it's always tough with a green screen, but
yeah, there it is. So and when it comes to the descriptors, because, unfortunately, this is not a scratch and sniff session.
That would be awesome.
We can't share, this wonderful aroma. But if you just imagine two words, berry and spice, and you've got a little bit of that ripe berry going on in there. And Dry Creek Valley, to me, has its own spice. It's almost a white pepper in quality, sometimes a freshly ground black pepper. And so you get a bit of that peppery quality along with the berry. And
the thing that I get with your Zinfandel is it's the pepper that comes out is, to me, freshly ground. It's, it's not, it's when they sit there with that pepper mill and it's so freshly ground. But I also, and this is where people think I'm a little strange, but I also I get cinnamon stick, like that is shaved cinnamon stick. Also, not again, it's got to be not just you're taking a cinnamon stick and putting it up to your nose. It's when you grate that cinnamon stick. That's what I get. And it's so, I'm sorry, people listening, because you're missing out. It is so pronounced. As you bring it up to your nose, it's you don't have to stick your nose in the glass to get that,
it just kind of wafts up.
Yes.
Yeah, that the warm baking spices, that's another key complementary part of the Zin. And it sometimes it can smell like berry pie, sometimes it can, I'm just think about other, kind of common descriptors to use. But the cinnamon, I like that. I just used a cinnamon stick this week, and so it's fresh in my mind.
Right? It's you've got to grate it. People are like, really? It's different than when you just stick a cinnamon. But to me, it is. Sticking a cinnamon stick up to my nose is very different than grinding that cinnamon and getting the small particles. It's just got more essence to it when it's grinded, and that's what I get. It's like such a nice wine, and it's consistently such a beautiful wine. It's like, that when you open this mother clone, that it's going to be, a happy night, but and it's a nice balance between those spices and the fruit. Lots of times Zin can be, and I love Zin, so take this. Zin can be overly bearing in one realm. It can be just all spice, or it can be all fruit, like that dry type of fruit, or even that jam in your face fruit. And the other thing that Zin can have a tendency to do is alcohol in a glass. And this is like the perfect balance between all three. Like,
yes, thank you. Yeah, that, the alcohol thing is always, Zinfandel you'll often hear stories about Zinfandel bunches having everything from raisins to green berries on them. And, when you get them in the tank, sometimes, you try to hit the windows so that, our winemaker one time, Monse, quipped, we make spice bombs, not fruit bombs when it comes to Zinfandel. And they are more on the spicy side. And I think just really attempting to pick it at the right moment. I mean, really, it's key to not, our Zin, I'm going to have to look at there we go. This is a 15%, but you wouldn't guess it. It doesn't have the volatility that some
Zins are known for.
Some Zins have, which is okay, and people love them, and they're great. But there's finesse, I guess, is what I would say. There's more of a finesse to our mother clone Zinfandel when it comes to, the balancing act between all the things, all the aromas, and things that can turn ugly if you're not careful. Or at least not ugly, but a different category.
Yes, but the finish is very long, and it carries. It's got body. It's got there's alcohol in it because of the body of it, but it's not in your face. It's not that volatile alcohol that burns your tongue. It's just
Right.
enough to allow it to kind of take your tongue and just let the finesse of it
Right.
continue to end, as it carries on. And
Yeah.
you know what, when you do something good, you stick to it. That's all I
Yeah.
can say.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now your home ranch, right? Your home ranch, you said that is mostly Zinfandel, right?
Right. 33 of the 50 are Zinfandel.
Okay. And then you have I'm blanking on the East Side Ranch. That's where you
Right.
have your Bordeaux varieties.
Right.
Right. Okay. And now you also make, now I don't know, do you make them a single varietal Merlot?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay. I was not aware of that, but you do make, I am aware of Cabernet Sauvignon.
Right.
So
There's
talk
the
to me.
wisdom.
Yeah. So talk to me about your Cab Sauv and the name, why wisdom, what it
Haha.
entails.
Uh, I'd love to tell the story because when one of the first pieces of property after 1963 was purchased, it was 5 acres on West Dry Creek Road, so just a couple miles west of where I'm sitting. And they decided to plant Cabernet Sauvignon over there. And it has been now planted for well over 50 years. So it was 1965. Yeah. So when it was 40 years old, however, we replanted. And
Okay.
here's where the wisdom story kicks in. We decided to stay with the same variety, Cabernet Sauvignon. But my Uncle John was the one who picked out a clone. And it was really interesting because we've never really fussed much over clones. If the grape works for the site, not worry about it too much. Anyway, so he picked out clone 4, or the
Okay.
Argentinian clone, or the
Oh,
Mendoza clone. And it grows a much smaller bunch than our Cabernet Sauvignon growing across the way, because we have about 33 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon planted as well. So this little 5-acre piece, he planted 4.5 acres to the Mendoza clone and half an acre to Malbec. And that is kind of the basis for our Wisdom Cabernet Sauvignon. And when he replanted it, it was about 2 years before he passed away. And this wine was made in the beginning, in honor of my uncle and all the years of wisdom that he had planting grapes here in Dry Creek Valley, making the wine. And we, in fact, even make it a little bit different. Some people hold wines back and things like that. We actually, in the early years of making wine, would age it for 2 years in tanks or oak, redwood tanks or oak, and then age it another year or 2 before it's released. And that's nearly unheard of these days. If you want to, get it in the bottle and you want it 6 months down the road. So this one took its time in oak, about 2 months in French oak, 2 years in French oak. And then we bottle it and we wait another year before we release it.
Okay.
In honor of that way that we had used to make the red wines in the early days. So it's a testament to my uncle. It's a testament to, over 55 years plus growing one particular variety in one place. And it's interesting because it's on what we call the dry side of Dry Creek Valley. It's actually the upside, and it's kind of in its own little spot where when the sun goes down, it's some of the first to go into shadow.
Okay.
And it's a lovely spot for Cabernet Sauvignon, and they chose the right grape for the right spot for 55 years and going. And the wisdom is again just in honor of all of those years, 3 generations planting on the same spot, and just
choosing the right clone when it could have been
choosing the right clone when the time came. Although I usually say when you have Cabernet Sauvignon in the ground for 40 years, nobody ever hears of old vine Cabernet. They hear of old vine Zin, but you don't hear of old vine Cabernet. And my brother-in-law, who's the vineyard manager, was happy to replant and start all over again. And it's just been, like I said, like you said, the right clone for the right spot and the right grape. Yeah, for the spot. So anyway, that's the background on the Wisdom Cab.
I love when there's stories behind like how the name comes from, there's always something, but sometimes it's just like, I saw the name somewhere, whatever. But when there's true reasoning and logic and, care behind what it goes, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you're right. You never hear old vine cab. And like, why do you think Zin, I mean, every grape varietal has clones. It's not just a single thing, right? Cab Franc has clones, but when you talk clones, people's minds go to Pinot Noir, right? There's all of the Pinot Noir clones, right? And then when you talk about old vine, everybody's brains go to Zinfandel. Why is there a reason why Zin is deemed the grape variety to talk about old vine?
I think it has to be the fact that they were here, the vineyards were here, were established, and people held on to them, so that there was, when they started to bring in things like Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, those were newer. They were newer to the area, and so I just think that people stuck with Zinfandel because, again, people were still, if you were growing it and you weren't a winemaker yourself, winemakers wanted Zinfandel, again, for the beauty and the ease of this grape, that the delicious wine that it makes. And so I think when it comes to, I think it became kind of venerable in a way, people like that, there's spots on Olivet Road, with these old vines that the Italians planted a long time ago. There's spots here in Dry Creek Valley, same thing. You've got these old vines still producing, still going. And I think it's the ease of the grape, it's the tastiness of the grape that kept these vines in place. And then they became venerable, and they became the wise vines. Instead of wise guys, they became the wise vines. And other people started to really appreciate them and either started making wine from them. I mean, I could think of Kent Rosenblum.
Oh,
he knew
wow.
where all the good stuff was, and he's one of them that I could think of that really went, understood what an old vine Zin could produce, and so he made it part of his line. And so there's others, Joel Peterson. I mean, there's many others who recognize that probably early enough to save them from either development or being torn up to plant Chardonnay. So there's a lot of reasons, but yeah, you're right. It is curious that Zinfandel got the moniker of old vine, and there's I know there are some old vineyards of like the other varieties, but they just don't have maybe the cachet of old vines then. I don't know.
It just doesn't.
Maybe it's the old gnarly,
That's what I was, because they're really the main ones that are head trained, right? The majority of the other vines are trellised, so they all kind of look the same. I mean, to a general eye, they all kind of look the same. They all do the same thing. They're all hanging out on the things. But Zinfandel, they're head trained, and they are just gnarly. And as they get old, they gain so much character. And it's like they own the wisdom. They know what's happened over the past, years or whatever. And
they are the ones, because this is kind of an interesting thing to talk about, because I think each het pruned Zinfandel is its own, as if it's our own fingerprint. The person who prunes it, and there's been many people who have pruned these 40-year-old vines out here, you can study the vine and see where they moved and where they pruned for the next year, and then how they spread the vine eventually out so that they could ripen everything. And Pete Segasio and I had a conversation a while ago about whether Zinfandel head prunes, if at all. We both truly believe that head pruning is the only way, the goblet shape of the vine is the only way to do Zinfandel. We've tried to put it on a trellis here at the winery, and it was not a successful experiment. Zinfandel likes to put its fruit right in the middle of the vine, and when you trellis something, it pulls it out, and it didn't want to do it. It wasn't a successful experiment in our eyes. So we feel very strongly that head pruning is the way for Zinfandel. And I think, again, that's why we've got these old vines, because they're happy in that way. I mean, they're 40 years old, they're still producing. The 100, when they reach 100, they probably, won't be producing as much, but certainly what they will be is very concentrated,
Right.
and
Yeah.
flavorful.
Yeah. And this is so me being weird too. They always remind me of like a hand coming out of the ground,
Yes.
like just I'm winning. I'm getting out. I'm getting to show you what I can do, type thing.
Yeah.
But
That's
they're
a
very
great,
unique.
great analogy. I'm winning. Because it's a struggle on a hillside to
Yeah.
get all the things aligned. I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. And they're so unique. I think that's why people are drawn to them. And I think that may be why, luckily they weren't ripped out to put something else in there, and they're
Yeah.
appreciated for what they can give and what they continue to give. So yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, but always interesting why people gravitate, the clones go, there's clones of Chardonnay, there's clones of everything, but people clones Pinot, old vine,
Right.
Zin, it's
Yeah.
just what people go to. It's just what people
Yeah.
go to. So
True.
we're getting close to an hour, but I want to make sure, because I think that it is
Wow.
an important thing, an important aspect of your winery is the sustainability.
Right.
So can you tell us, this is always like a gray area thing, because it's kind of like this term that just gets thrown out today. It's the thing to do. And
Right.
there's so many wineries that are, dare I say, jumping on the bandwagon to say they're sustainable or whatever. But you have been doing it for a very long time. And so tell
Right.
us, why do you feel that sustainability is so important, and what does sustainability mean to Pernoncelli?
Okay. Well, it's all built into the word. It makes us sustainable. It makes the earth sustainable, and it goes out into the community and sustains us. And I know that sounds kind of weird to say that, but it is part of what we are. We are good stewards of the earth. And when we were certified in our 90th anniversary, which was very fitting. And we just have, it's just a matter of what can we do better out there? That's I'm answering it in two ways. You asked why, and I like the sustainability program because you reach a certain point where you're certified. Okay, but you don't just sit there on your laurels. You then, the next time you're certified, because we get recertified every other year, the winery and then the vineyard. And each year we show the assessor, this is what we've done. This is a project we've worked on, and we've gotten better in this particular area. And when I talk about that, it could be anywhere from water, how much water is used out for drip irrigation, because we do drip irrigate almost every one of our vines except the old part of the vineyard. It has to do with their cover crops. It has to do with tilling and no tilling, taking turns so that the erosion, there's erosion control involved. It goes over to harvest, where the pumice, the leftover skins and seeds, go out into the vineyard. They age for a year, and then they get turned into the soil to, again, just make everything fertilized. But it's the full circle, basically. We use stems for erosion control, so that they're not just being dumped somewhere and not used. There's in the winery, it's more what I would call pedestrian, but it's the lighting. It's the making sure that the lights aren't on all the time. You're saving energy. You're finding different ways of making your packaging lighter. It's kind of the simple things. It's finding the right tractor that has less carbon emission. Those kinds of things all work towards being sustainable. But again, and I will say it again, because I like the sustainability certification, because we work on a project and we get better, and then we work on another one and we get better, and it reaches out to all aspects, not just the vineyard and the winery, but also to our employees and everybody in the community. It is better for everybody to follow that particular sustainability.
It's funny you said it's the simple things inside, but it's really not. You would think it's simple. The lighting you would
Right.
think is simple, but for why do so many people not pay attention to that? And that's actually really a rather easy thing to pay attention to, right?
Right.
But there's so many, and not just wineries, just people in general that
Mhm.
don't pay attention to it. And the thing that I like about the sustainability is, and that you pointed out, is it's not just in the vineyard, it extends out. It's how you treat the people and what the people are experiencing and everything, like a tractor is not a tractor, and if you're paying attention to those things, every
Mhm.
little bit makes a big difference,
Right. And the key for us was when my nephew Mitch first started working for the family business, he was tasked with doing this. He's in charge of the certification. He's the one who develops the programs, and he's the one who got it both done in the vineyard and the winery. So it's just nice to have that kind of full circle,
Right.
and have him be part of that. So it's wonderful.
He's a busy person.
He is. Oh, yeah. Because Lori, if you remember, you probably know there are 200 questions at least
At least.
in each of the certifications. So that's a lot. That's a lot of information to go through. Anyway, he's done a great job.
And to keep track of. It's a lot of information. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things that I love, I'm not that I ever really need a cause to drink, but I do like when there are wine holidays and things like that. And there is National Zinfandel Day, which I believe was November 17th, somewhere.
Yes.
Somewhere
It
around.
hovers. It's, I think, that third Wednesday, I think, is what it ends up being. I'm not certain, but yes, it was the 17th.
Okay, so the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, not of thing,
Right.
right? Before Thanksgiving or whatever. And it's put on by the ZAP, which is the Zinfandel Advocates and Producers. So on their website, it's Zinfandel is America's grape. Let's celebrate it. Okay. And I think we've talked about, the proof that, this is the one that got us through prohibition and all of this. So as we talk about your last Zinfandel here, the
Yes.
Bushnell Vineyard, and on it,
Yes.
the beautiful 90-year celebration. Okay.
Yes.
This is a 2019. Can you tell us a bit more about ZAP, about Zinfandel,
Sure.
and then bring us home with that Zin and maybe what the difference between those two Zins are?
Okay, I will. All right. Well, ZAP, we've been a member of ZAP, Zinfandel Advocates and Producers, for many years, practically since they started. I think we were 1 or 2 years in. But the beauty of this organization is their diligence in getting the word out about Zinfandel. And I think, it's America's grape. It is, it's found its home here in California, but it's grown all around the world, and it does well wherever it's put. But the great thing about ZAP is that they each year, I know the pandemic kind of rammed a few things, but each year they put on a wonderful Zinfandel tasting in San Francisco. And, thousands and thousands and thousands of people have come through this event. I think it's been probably close to 30 years going on. And, there is just the opportunity to try the grape from as many winemakers as you can bear in one day. But it is, but the ZAP group, they've got some great projects. They also are doing some heritage vineyards. They're taking budwood from heritage vines that are grown all around the area, and they then plant them in one place, and then they're able to monitor them. And I think they even make a wine out of them, make a Zinfandel out of them. But they're dedicated to spreading the story of Zinfandel. They've got the Zinfandel trail that you can follow. And, go on the website, they've got videos, all the different winemakers talking about all different parts of the state, Paso Robles, you got all kinds of different areas. And it is just nice to see it all in one place, one focus, one grape. So that's the beauty of the ZAP group. And if anybody is around at the end of January, there's the grand tasting on, I think it's the 28th or 29th. I don't remember which day.
28th.
28th. Yeah.
Oh, that might be the trade, might be the 28th or
So
somewhere around
right
there.
around that time, the last Saturday of January, let's just put it that way. Come and taste some great Zinfandels. I think they've got something like 80 wineries times 3 or more Zinfandels per winery. You're going to have a nice depth of Zin. And one of the wines we'll be pouring is the Bushnell Vineyard Zinfandel. This vineyard has a very long history with us. It goes back to when my grandfather owned it in the 1940s. He sold it to his daughter Margaret and her husband Al Padroni, and they farmed it from the 50s through the 90s. And their daughter Carol Bushnell, married to Jim, they then took over the vineyard in 1992 and continue to farm it to this day with a little help from our vineyard team. It is the difference between Mother Clone and Bushnell Vineyard is pretty much night and day. This is 100% Zin, so no Petite Syrah. It is from one of their prime blocks, and it is spicy. It is spicy to the extent that it's going towards the ground pepper spice rather than to the warm baking spices. Those are more apparent in the Mother Clone. So you've got like this spice, and then the berry comes in behind it. And it is, in fact, Monse, our winemaker, uses the Barolo yeast for this block. And she says, because Italians like to take it slow, and the Barolo yeast slows the fermentation down. So we get over 2 weeks of fermentation out of this. And it just, these levels of flavor that come out of it are just fantastic. So it's a wonderful expression of this vineyard. And again, I just said berry spice for the Mother Clone, and this is like spice berry. So if I had to use 2 words to describe it, but yeah, so that's our Bushnell Zin.
Well, that is awesome. And I have to go back to that grand tasting. Whoever came up with the marketing for this year is so clever, because it's all back to the future concept. And I think the grand tasting there's a winemaker's dinner, and it's the Enchantment Under the Sea winemaker's dinner. So it is so clever. So go online and check it out. And can you tell people where they can find you so they can go online and
of course
place some orders for these amazing wines and find out even more about you guys?
Oh, thank you. Pedroncelli.com is all you need to do is go in there and discover the website. And, there's an online store if you're so inclined to give these a try, or you're welcome to stop by our tasting room. Our cellar door is open 7 days a week, except for those major holidays. But other than that, we're here ready to pour and get your feet dirty when you go across the street and look at the Mother Clone Zin vines.
See, people are going to love that. That's fantastic. And non-appointments?
If you could make a reservation, great. We have walk-ins as staff is available. So, that's the whole pandemic story going on right now. So if you just give us a heads up, you're coming, we're happy to accommodate you.
And also on social media, they can find you on
Facebook,
social media.
Instagram, the whole Twitter. Every once in a while, we throw something over there. Yeah, so you'll find us under Pedroncelli Wine or Pedroncelli. Just look for us out there. We'll be there.
And I see you have a little visitor there that's been coming and saying hi. Who is that?
Yeah. He is gone now. My husband took him home, but that was Jasper, our Australian Shepherd. Yeah, he was getting a little bored. I was hoping he wouldn't. Sometimes he starts to moan. Oh, can we go now? But he probably is at the dog park right now.
Oh, he's having a good time then. He's having a good time. Yeah. So I saw his little head pop up earlier before, and I was like, oh,
he did. I know. I was like, oh, Jasper. He just wanted to be part of it.
Absolutely, and deservedly so. He absolutely belongs in there. But I want to thank you so much for taking time out and visiting with me, and thank you for the wines. I knew they were going to be spectacular, but now I'm tasting it again. It is spectacular. And we are going to finish the bottle because my husband did not allow me. He was like, you are only allowed one glass in there. So because he's looking forward to it also, but he is making one of our favorite things to go with your wine. He is making homemade nachos. So
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh, the wine will go very well with it.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. So he puts a little spice into the nachos, and we have multiple, shredded jack cheese, cheddar cheese, that type of combination thing. And then it's ground turkey with some sort of seasoning. I don't know what he uses, but some sort of seasoning. And this is going to be perfect. So we will enjoy it tonight. So with that, thank you very much. And I'd like to say slancha, and I hope to see you in San Francisco.
Indeed. All right. Thank you again. And cheers, everyone.
Have a great night. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.